We've entitled this subject String Logic, because I think this is a question that brands and industry and everybody is sort of toying with. It's bubbling along. What are these names going to look like in the wild?
We wanted to put something visual together because, picture's worth 1,000 words, or as they say in Las Vegas, $1,000. sometimes more.
So essentially, we're going to be looking at how do brands attack the big beast of our existing websites, our existing emails, our existing destination marketing, all of the different names that we already use and that our customers already know us for, and they already know where to find us. How do you migrate from that existing structure towards the new structure without expecting your customers to completely shift their thinking and reinvent their instinctive relationship with you? So, some beautiful slides by Frank. Well done.
Thank you. Well, we want to give a sense of how brands might ultimately use these strings in the wild. So, it's one thing to hear about this and to talk about it a little bit here in the room. It's entirely another thing to see it, see these brands in use. And so we could see, in this case, let's see if we can get the slide up. Technical difficulties here.
Sorry,
there we go. We can sort of get a sense of, how a brand might use this in marketing, in print. They may change the way, and this is what I was talking about this morning a little bit. Right now it's not conceivable that there is a just do it.Nike, but as Nike goes ahead and uses just do it.Nike in print, on television, and then running.Nike, or basketball.Nike, or Jordan.Nike, you can see how this kind of starts to take on a life of its own and evolve.
So we just laid out a few goals that we wanted to brush upon throughout the session, and it's really just all about understanding existing structures. So looking at your current websites and emails and what they're supposed to look like, segmenting the names for easy customer navigation, looking at geographies, looking at different corporate functionalities, looking at affiliate partner networks, and migrating your existing destinations to your new site and new email logic. And additionally, as we touched upon so far today as well, is the new generics are also going to be very attractive for brands. We were using the help.del, del.help example, and many of those are going to apply to many of the brands that have applied. So that's also really worth looking at. And
to the point about the earlier session that Jennie-Marie made, it is what makes Google so great, and I think Google clearly knows this, is that they are a reflection of the popular meme, what people are looking for, backlinks, page rank. This is a reflection of us all, what we're doing. And so, it's not so much that what you do as a brand or what we all do and how we implement these, how Google might interpret that as, if that becomes popular. If you take a Super Bowl commercial and you advertise just do it.Nike, it's on Google to reflect that back or to denigrate the value of Google. Google doesn't become as useful anymore, and Google knows that. So I think, here again, it's a matter of, it's up to you as to how these are used, and up to us all, really. And Google will reflect that.
So we've structured this very, very loosely into three areas that we want to focus on. So one, which is probably arguably the most high impact, exciting, and is going to lead the force of consumer change as they begin to see these names out in the wild. So that's destination marketing.
Here we've just got a few little stills here to kind of give you an idea of what this might look like. This is a numerical domain. Not clear exactly whether 2-character numerics will be allowed in the first round, but as time wears on, this is just give you a quick example of, here's a Heinz example of what marketing might look like with 57.Heinz. And I think if we go to the next slide here, you've got new.civic rather than drive the Honda, HondaCivic.com. You'll have hybrid.accord. And those of you Hal was speaking about Delta earlier. We could see comfort.delta and showing how just different vignettes of marketing within the company structure. I spoke about the BMW billboard. I can totally see this day coming. When I drive down the freeway, down, the 101 in California, as the case may be, and see the new i3 advertised. And I mean, this is a future that's coming to us all.
And the interesting thing is that ICANN, from what I understand, actually does believe that the first delegation is going to come in November, which is big news for us, which also means that some of the brands are going to start going live in the spring. And that's not very far away. So here's hoping you've bought your outdoor advertising and you've planned for what those strings are going to look like, because the industry's counting on you. We're counting on you to legitimize this program, demonstrate these names in public. They're memorable, they're exciting, your consumers are going to love them. They'll be wild and shocking, but this is going to forever change the way people look at naming online. It's really exciting.
Who was the individual earlier on this side of the room who asked the question about YouTube and Google?
That was Jim.
Jim, was that you? Yes. That was a really great question. I think, I wanted to add to that, clearly this isn't a Google point of view because I don't work for Google, but, if you're using, youtube.brand.com today, it stands to reason that if you use youtube.brand, and they're not sort of, you're not using that in a harmful way. I can't imagine that they would shut you down on that string, going forward. I think it'll just be sort of an extension of how these are used today. We're just shifting the dot over one step, is how I kind of see it. Clearly, it'd be interesting to see, how Google's IP department interprets that, in view of the fact that they are launching .youtube. So they may have a change of tack, now that, but if you're marketing, twitter.heinz.com and you get .heinz, it's conceivable that you'll be able to use twitter.heinz.
Indeed. So we're very pleased with the session before us, because thank you to Hal and Peter, you did our work for us. In looking at the second area, your website, we thought we'll just look at this from a very general perspective, because websites have some very common, simple structures that everybody accepts. There's contact, and there's home, and there's services and help, and there's all that. So we think that has to all be taken into account when looking at the new structures with the new gTLDs, because that's what customers expect. And if you just base your new website logic on that would be an industry standard, and it's a simple one, and it's according to existing consumer behavior. So you're not trying to teach them something new that isn't already familiar. So that might be one recommendation we'd make, is start first with the existing website structure that the world has sort of accepted already.
Right. We have a few examples here for BMW: drive.bmw, my.bmw, home.bmw. It's really up to the brand. Here is Dell example. Cameras.dell, my.dell again. My figures prominently. It seems logical. It's kind of like we didn't know what we were going to call the early 2000s. It turns out we called them the Audis or the early 2000s.
I think you called them that.
There you go.
I've
heard that.
before.
I've heard that in America.
No, I don't think so.
Anyway, the market will define itself. I think marketing and the marketers will kind of help us with this.
And the first ones out will set the standard, because if they don't do something completely silly, then everyone will say, well, this is how it's done. Right. And everyone will follow suit. So if there's some general consensus in dialogue, it doesn't need to be an enormous formal report of here are the rules, because everyone sets their own rules.
Right.
But an existing sort of common practice will be quite helpful. I like the idea that, Adrian, you talked about the white paper on this, and that's something that the industry will probably embrace with open arms, something that says, well, we could try it this way. And it's open to commentary, but it's, something from which to work from.
Yeah.
Another thing that everybody knows the new gTLDs bring to the brands is an ability to segment by geography. Because a global brand, although you're a global brand, every country speaks a different language, and they don't just speak a different language, they speak a different culture. They respond differently. In Norway, you can't say, I'm good.
Right.
You have to say, well, I understand, I've been complimented for... Has to be a roundabout way of saying this is where I do something well. Whereas in the US, that's absolutely acceptable.
On this Virgin example, what I think is interesting, here what we've done is, we've shown that you could have different geographies, .fly, .virgin, but it's also conceivable, if you're a brand, that you may want to create SLDs like SEA.virgin, directly, as an SLD. So here, this is a third level example. So fly.virgin, to put a finer point on this, would be akin to having rather SEA at the top left, Seattle, would be akin to having sea.virgin.com today, a third level name. But it's conceivable if you were Virgin with .virgin, you may want to have SEA, Seattle.virgin as a second level name within your namespace. And then if that's the case, and you want it, I think the strategy here is to reserve, if you're letting your clients, Sean, Eric, Adamson, get SEA, .virgin as a client domain. A lot of brands are contemplating giving SLDs away to their customers. It's important to formulate your brand strategy and reserve those names as premium names within your portfolio that you may use strategically in your business. Adrian Canderas.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Not a bit.
Great. I think this is a good time to promote participation in the ICANN world. Because if you're a brand sitting back here saying, geography is a great place to start, I'm going to have au.virgin, you can't. You're not allowed to.
Right.
The current rules prohibit you from doing that, and it's a crap rule.
Right.
Okay? And it's one that the Boffins have put in, that has just stuck around. And so if we all got together as
And said no.
You can't get Australia.virgin. That's out as well.
Yeah.
And you can't get the capital city, I believe it. I'm happy to be corrected if someone knows a policy, but Jeff, I'm looking at you, the guru of the policy. But, and so, this is where, you can sort of let the policy stuff wash over you and just go, that's for somebody else.
That doesn't work for us. We're moving on to what is going to work moving forward.
Yeah. But if we've got to sort of put a stop to this carry-on, because we're going to reach a point as brands and say, hey, I've got a great innovation where I want to do this, and we go, no, you can't. You can't have Australia.virgin. Well, why can't I?
Yeah.
Virgin's in Australia. I don't know. But
That took me a moment.
that just came from me. But my point. So here's an opportunity. If you think that the ICANN world is for somebody else to make decisions on, there are decisions being made for you right now that are going to impact your ability to innovate and do fun things.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, at the moment, ICANN is particularly open to being influenced
Yes.
by all the
That's
newcomers.
an excellent point.
They are seeing big players. Google, welcome to this industry. Amazon, welcome. We expect,
Yep.
we implore you to exert your influence, because we're ready for change, and change must come with this. And actually, the existing policy structures may not all be appropriate or necessary.
But to add one thing, this, we said earlier, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And the gTLD process itself shows, this process took 10 years, but it's here finally, right? And in a big way. It may take a while to turn the ship, but eventually the ship will turn. Once you have the brands in the route, it inexorably changes ICANN. Because now, instead of policy wonks showing up at the meetings that are just talking about very esoteric subjects that don't touch consumers, now you have the marketers in the route who are influencing, and that'll, you can't get that genie back in the bottle. It's just
but the time is now, because the second that they start getting deployed in the route, then it's done. The policy rules are in place.
Because it's a fluid dynamic, because you'll get, at first we have how many 100 brands total, unique brands were there? Six. Thank you. I'm not a brand applicant, so I wasn't looking at that number. But you're going to have tens of thousands to follow, and those are all new faces that are going to be stakeholders showing up at the ICANN. So if you have 10,000 stakeholders to follow, it's the future stakeholders who aren't here yet, you may be frustrated by today not being able to get Australia.virgin or AU.virgin or a numerical domain, .Heinz. Because of some esoteric rule that has to change. But when it's a multi-stakeholder model. So when you have 10,000 marketers come to say, well, why can't we've got to find a way to make this work? Why can't we can put a man on the moon? How come we can't have Australia.virgin? It doesn't make sense.
And that's okay to do for some of those. But some of the rules that we're being put on around our launch, for example, and the interaction with the trademark clearinghouse and the limit to only having 100 names for the use of my registry and all that sort of for the promotion and administration or whatever it is of my registry, these rules are going to hurt us if we wanted to do something else. And we can't go back from that. If you've given a name away to somebody, you can't get that name back. So whilst I agree with you, Frank, that the ICANN regime is such that it is iterative and it can change over time, there are going to be some policy decisions that are made pre-go live that we're going to have to wear for the for the duration.
For better or for worse, for that time, right? Good point, Adrian. Stefan?
Thanks. Can I just ask you both, isn't it, just building on from this discussion, isn't it time to put the users first, in essence? Because the policy decisions that Adrian's just mentioned were probably made because no one representing users was in the room at the time.
That's exactly
so
right.
the countries said you can't have Australia dot whatever because they didn't want it, and others have said you can't do numeric domains, probably for good reason. I don't know. I'm not a techie, but
or some legacy reason that they're trying to,
So if we now turn that round, put the users first, that will help from a marketing standpoint because obviously we'll be talking their language and helping service their needs, and also probably get over those policy hurdles that are coming from just one side of the room at the moment.
My personal take on it is I think that's a great point. I just think you can only push so hard. The ICANN process is a big ship that turns. I've watched it for a decade. I've only been personally going to ICANN meetings for the last 3 years, but I've had my attorneys at every single ICANN meeting for more than a decade, just watching the process, shaping it on my behalf, and attended the odd meeting in the Americas or in Europe myself. But it's a big ship that turns slowly, and you can't really push it too hard. I think a lot of this will take care of itself. I'm not advocating being defeatist and not trying at all. I'm just saying that this has been a big shift, and there are just the very attendance of us trying to talk about how this might all unfold shows that nobody really has all the answers just yet. And I think if you go too hard and push too far, even though Adrian and yourself and some of us here may have some vision as to, hey, we came and did this, let's now do this and compound on it. I think we've got enough that you get a good commercial success, and the rest of it will take care of itself. I'm not advocating going slower. I just think that if you push too hard, maybe it has unintended consequences. Miss Sweezy at the back, Elizabeth.
So actually, this is a great topic, and thank you for bringing it up. I work with Fairwinds Partners, and we handled the applications for about 50 corporations in the United States and Europe. And a lot of our clients, their main goal was obviously to be able to operate geographic identifiers at the second level. So this is really important and a huge issue for us right now. It's something that I've been working on personally for probably the last 3 months. Unless someone wants to correct me, and I'm happy to be corrected. The research that we've done has shown that the applicant guidebook allows, and it's actually very unclear, but the applicant guidebook says that each registry operator can go to each individual GAC member to request that their geographic identifiers be released at the second level. So unless there's something that's different that I don't know about, please correct me. But so our goal is to create a process where the GAC is able to take a list of, say, for example, let's start with brands, because they're all pretty much have the same business model, have the same goals.
And they now have an association.
Pardon?
And they now have an association
Right,
through which to speak.
Exactly. So taking those, saying yes or no, each country saying yes or no, and then allowing the registries to just move forward.
And would that be an email? Because it's unclear. Could it be that simple?
Exactly. So the actual execution is still unclear, and that's something that we're definitely open to suggestions from the community. But we are hoping for some time with the GAC and Buenos Aires to present this idea, mainly because there's just not a process.
Right.
It's very unclear. So
It's fluid.
It can happen. It's just a very convoluted and very unclear. Well, it can be convoluted because tends to make things convoluted, but it doesn't have to be that way. So
That was a great.
our goal is to create a proactive process, and so if anyone would like to chat about that later, I am up for it. But yeah,
That's a
definitely
terrific.
Where's Philip?
That's a terrific comment, Elizabeth. Really great. But so this is sort of something we're all kind of walking through this evolution. Do we want to go through a couple more slides?
Well,
and take some
I
more
was going to
questions?
say another thing that the new gTLD, specifically for brands, have introduced is the ability to now break into the affiliate networks and the resellers. And there's an applicant in the room, I believe I saw them on the list, an Austrian insurance company who applied for their TLD because they have a network of like 50 subsidiaries. And how do you name them? And how do you keep the brand consistent? And how do you understand that subsidiary businesses are a part of parent? And the new gTLD was the logical choice to be able to make those separations. So I think that's going to be a huge definer and a major benefit, and one that consumers understand and one that businesses understand, and something else that we can hang the gTLD hook on that is about intuitive behavior, because they're already used to seeing, dot reseller, dot,
Right.
I don't know, I've got nothing.
Next slide.
Next slide.
We'll soldier through here.
Oh.
So this is
Wait, I've got you in the wrong one. This is where we are.
wonderful. So here, this is a large BMW dealer in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and this is just one example of how the dealer. It's really at the dealer's discretion. There is no right answer here. I was making this comment earlier about Paris. When you go to Paris, and Napoleon had Haussmann redesign the city, tear it all down, and rebuild Paris. And that's why Paris looks so charming today with this wonderful design and the way, big boulevards and the way the city's divided up. But if you saw the original plan of Paris, they didn't envision a tobacco shop on the corner here by the Arc de Triomphe and a pornographic bookstore around the corner. It's just, that's what makes Paris so charming, is it's kind of unfolded on its own. You can kind of paint the broad strokes, but everybody else is going to fill in the finery and the detail. And I think you overly shape your names and your namespace at your peril. It's the namespaces from the generic perspective that thrive with more of a hands-off governance. But anyway, here again we have how Virgin might use sub-brands, to Jennie-Marie's point. Records.Virgin, Mobile.Virgin, America.Virgin.
And I think the last subject, and I dare you all to admit this out loud, is the one that we're a little bit the most confused about. What does email look like? How do you make it look less silly? How do you make it look more structured and add less detail to it? So, is it at CEO? Is it at CEO.bmw? Is it at Germany.CEO.bmw? How do you create a simple logic that accommodates for all the different nuances within a business?
Right, and I think here again, we're still in a very early stage. This is to your point. Here's do you want to have sub-address? You have this great latitude and luxury in naming. I think one thing that all brands are going to need. It's like, well, how is this all going to work? Like, you look at this and you've got schedule at testdrive.bmw. Okay, well, that's going to go to the sales division, scheduling test drives. And is this going to be geographic? Are we going to? Do we even need geography? We don't necessarily need geography in the name, because we have the IP address and we can track back which geographic region they're in, or we can have them include their zip code if you're in the Americas. There are a lot of this is yet to be defined, but you could see that there's going to have to be infrastructure to facilitate the operation of these names. It's not going to be just enough. I certainly don't believe that it's going to be enough for the brands to just simply, okay, well, now go ahead and create these at your registrar in the way you traditionally did. When you're managing .brand, you're going to need the infrastructure to run the back end, the middleware for the accounting department within your organization, and then the front end to create these registrations and put them into operation.
There was one of my favorite presentations so far was the .kpmg, the gentleman from KPMG. That was just such an informative, fantastic presentation. And one of the points that he brought up was the change management process internally at a brand, a large international brand, of explaining to the marketing department, explaining to the legal department, explaining to the technical department, explaining to your PR agencies and your communications agencies, this is the new address. Do we change all our contracts? Do we change? There's so much change involved in it.
It's a big ship.
There's enough consultants working in this room. I hope collectively that is part of the services that you're providing to your brand clients, because this change process is not something they've ever had to do on their own. So they're going to have to invent the entire thing. So as much as we can as an industry, we need to help make that process simple, that brands learn what it is to change your email addresses and your website addresses.
Registrars will evolve. Existing registrars will evolve into back, and some won't, and they'll be overtaken by others that do. And that's sort of a natural evolution that's always happened. But there's definitely going to be demand for these products and services. The tidal wave of demand probably won't come immediately, but it will come,
This is my favorite slide.
Oh, that's so neat. There we go. This is very self-serving.
This is your conversation with Richard Branson.
That's right. I get to talk with Richard here, Sir
you
Richard. So here, this is just sort of one example, and this isn't, again, there's no right answer here. This is just to sort of help you all percolate. What does your inbox look like in 20 years? And this is, sort of one example of what may come. I'm not the ghost of Christmas future, as I'm the owner of .Christmas and operator of .Christmas, but I'm not the ghost of Christmas future. I'm just a shadow of what may come, and this is a shadow.
Kind of the zeitgeist.
That's it, with good zeitgeist. This is. So just to sort of give you an example, I mean, there are a lot of ways that your inbox, may evolve. You could have, affinity second-level names like Rockstar.Virgin, or Rockstar could become a brand. I mean, there are a lot of ways to operate your gTLD as a brand. And there is, again, repeating myself here, but there is no one right answer. And what's right for one brand may not be right for others.
So, any questions aside from? Oh, Adrian's left us. There he is. There he is. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions at all? No. All the same. Oh, yeah.
We still like the slides, so we can't.
I actually think that some of the people who withdrew will reapply.
Yeah.
The
timing might have been wrong.
Timing's wrong, and this is if you don't have a Sherpa, a guide, I mean, this is a confusing, convoluted process, and all of a sudden you get a clarifying question, and you're like, you know what, this is just too much to bite off right now. Let's just withdraw. Exactly, I'm just going to withdraw. But as this process moves along, you're going to see, more, not less applicants. The first applicants will show us the utility, and then suddenly it'll be part of the popular meme, and everybody will want these. And I don't know when that turning point will come. Will it come in Buenos Aires at the ICANN meeting? Probably not. Will it come in London?
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden, 1,000 marketers show up and say, "Hey, we didn't apply, but now we want in on this because we saw, we saw what BMW did, and it became the global chuckle of the day, and we want to get in on some of that." That it's just part of a natural evolution. This isn't just sort of a real good question somebody asked me was, why are we doing this? Why bother with this at all? And it's it's sort of a taking back of your brand ownership in a more permanent way and elevating yourself. It's the trust and authority.
The final frontier of authority.
Yeah, it really is. There is no higher level than the top level. So there is nothing after this in naming. We may have Internet 2 and Internet 3 in terms of speed and how the wires run, and the internet may be in the cloud and with low orbiting satellites. But at the end, we're going to need an addressing system to access these sites, and we're going to need email and all the things that we kind of take for granted today. And it's going to come.
And the only thing that's necessary to keep the DNS relevant forever is innovation.
Right.
That's it.
Right. And this is sort of, in naming, this is a big deal. This is last mile innovation. There's nothing else after this. There's no higher level than the top. Language and the way we describe things doesn't change. We're not going to all of a sudden call it a polywally doodle because we've got .polywally doodle. That's not going to happen. We're going to continue to call these things what they are, and we're trying to eliminate the superfluous. In this case, it's I think from a brand's perspective, the extension of the country you're in. Do I get .com? Do I get .net? Do I run a .org for my charitable foundation? No. What you do is you control your brand authority. You don't have to worry about cyber squatting anymore. Let people make the noise they want to make on the other side of the dot because you have right of the dot authority, and that'll translate into everything you do. Search will follow that. If people. It was actually an interesting thing. I heard another applicant for a generic top-level name say to me, his philosophy was he was only going to sell his names directly. He didn't want to. He was trying to find a way because applicants have to treat all registrars equally. And he was trying to find a way to only sell the names himself because he didn't want to deal with any registrars. And two other applicants were sort of, this is early in the process. And they were, the two other applicants were watching this applicant and saying, watching with horror, saying, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? You're not going to sell through the registrar channel? You'll never sell any registrations. He was like, everybody will come to me because when they Google, how do I get a dot whatever, the only way to get one will be to come through me. So Google will have to show that. You know, it's not like, you know, or whatever other search engine you use. You know, for that search engine to become relevant, you know, you'll have to present the logical path to get it. You know, it's like when I pay my property tax bill. I have a house in Laguna Beach. When I go to pay my property tax bill, I pay property tax Laguna Beach. I can never remember the convoluted URL they use, but Google helps me find that and gives me that authority. If they had tax.oc, you know, it'd probably be a lot easier, and I type it in. And but ultimately, they show the way, right?
And this does actually give birth to a whole new industry as such. We've been, obviously, Domain Diction, we're a communications agency. So we think about language, we think about how do you express something, diction. And the DNS industry, it doesn't really make any sense for anyone outside of this industry. What does that stand for? In the domain name industry, that certainly isn't very, it has not much weight to it from an outside perspective. So we've been talking with outside parties saying, this is the naming industry. And we might even go so far as to suggest to this room, why don't we consider renaming the industry to the naming industry?
Yeah.
Because there's design and there's technology, there's all kinds of industries. We actually can call ourselves something even bigger than domain names.
Yeah.
We're names.
Let's run with that. it
All
it
right.
happened here.
On that note, you'll
You saw it here. But if anybody has any other questions, are we over? Are we under?
I have no idea.
Are we right on time?
Sunny, are we right on time?
Let's not.
All right.
Always
On
leave
that
one
note.
more. Okay, well, thank you sincerely.